Oh, Merry Christmas, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well on some positional occasions. All levels are familiar, your families, and all lines of well, communication system. So, in track communication system, how we see Christmas is basically how you want to see Christmas. It's an everyday thing. Uh, it gets you into the prophecies, it gets you into the gathering. It's not about gifts. It never was about gifts. It's about family. It's about togetherness. It's about unite, the unities and coming together, understanding, the levels of you and really understand the relation and what Christmas is all about. Now, all lines is communications that get you, and all of that's calculations how you start to see things in attraction. Gifts is basically the grounds of intelligence forming its travel. Gift. When I get the travel, it goes from one setting to another setting in some locations. It's like a mailman, coming from his post office and delivering mail to each other, right? That's basically what it is. Santa is basically how you see Santa Claus. Reindeer is how you see reindeer. It's all levels in your system. So it comes into your attractions, through the inner channel. So today is going to be a fun day because I thought I'd give you guys a set positions back in time. We'll go in sequence, modify, we'll see Mount Olympus, location with cycles, we'll see Zeus, we'll see Aphrodite, like position of travels, and location to a system and travel. Now that puts all communications to a system. Processing that is all of us how we come into settings to know exactly everything we come into is times continuance. And the more you formulate that settings, the more you stand to see your past, your present, your future, how you want to see your past, present, and future. And I say that again. It's about understanding, to change something. So there is no past, present, future because it's no set location in your settings until you bring it through consciousness. And like I said, if you perceive things, it's how you perceive things. It's how you want things to look around you. How you want to see Christmas. How you want to see the gathering. How do you want to see the family? How you want to see your life cycle, how you want to see your life system, how you want to see support system, how you want to see your through moderation, how you want to see your life force in recognitions, right? How you want to see yourself here, how you want to see yourself there. Well, in that vision location cycles, you've already done that through its equation, right? So today we're going to go back in time before Christ. Christ is coming. It's the home. It's the remembering cycles of intelligence, systematic lines of travel. Christ. Consciousness is lines of course centers, lines of Christmas. Now that puts all communication sounding how you start to see yourself. And there's all lines of position of foundations that put you in attractions. So it has a direct line link, and then all that communication high centers interference. So getting a communication system, let's get in track lines into all this amount of Olympus, right? Course centers, portal line, directing signals in process communications. Directing lines of link, process lines of 3-track locations and setting. Coliseum, and direct signals in track location. Very simple, very easy, very done. Process communications, because the team's already traveling through it. Attraction. Directing lines of symbolism lines, earth line, track locations of platforms, E lines of sea over lines, platforms in track locations coming in cycle. Directing signals into levels, portal line, defense lines, and screen lines and set core lanes and heist interference, and stargates and communications. Directing set lines, ground center line condition setting into metric force communication screens. Directing course centers into platitudes of 0 and position of 0 and position of 0 and track location heist interference of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Data processing, 1 signal, 1 ground center, 1 service, 1 traction, 1 division locations back in time. Now, directing lines of symbolism crosses line signals into Merkaba, tesseract, and a tetrahedron. You guys are in line communications high centers through command, ship, and travel and communications. Directing course centers puts center communications. Let's open up the sequence lines of panel, the process of communication grounds. Sets lines of platforms 1, 2, set lines of A line centers and travel in communication system. All levels and track the astral projections, astral travels, and astral connecting your settings and communications. Directing lines of flights, setting signal lines and heist interference into set correlation setting and solar graph screens adaptation to a cycle. Generate the screen lines adaptations all levels, flex over parallels and track locations, paradigms, polar shifts, all communication lines. Compulsories, directing signals and track locations and platforms. Directing line signals, line communication setting. Energize communication lines of high time sequence. 144, track lines of highest interference into operatives, in units, in travels, in point communication. All right. All right. Directing line signals, line set location to a system and travel. All right. Okay. So get in the communication ground centers, line conditions on lulls. So we go position the algorithms before Christ equals lines of triangulation into box. All right. BC, directing lines into A line C equals lines of H. So that's calculation. Home beacon light, D line centers, X lines in 1, platforms of screens, and platforms over true or tractions. Directing and modification lines of files or line direct signals in line screen. Box centers, box system, box travels, and kaleidoscopes and communication setting. I division screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Communicate the ground line service, upswing, up travels, in point communications. Directing lines of signals, balance lines of C over lines of A lines of A, lines of triangulation lines of B lines of C lines of A lines of D, and track communication system. All through point lines of communication setting and travel. Fred Flintstone. Funny, right? Stone Age, directing signals into modification ground centers, lines of surface, and track correlation system. Back and track centers, line condition settings, process communication system, all through a mapping sequence. Now directing lines of communication system, all lines of settings. Process calculation lines before Christ. Calculate screen lines going back in sequence, back in panel, back in traction, back in division, back in time. All signals, all right? All right, so getting past lines of highest interference puts all communications sent into planes. The plane lines of center process communications in direct and redirect and signal. Platforms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of 0 in traction. Platforms 1, platforms 2. Okay, process lines, platform 6, platforms 8. Directing signal lines of 0 in track communication system into mothership and travel communications. Directing line of modification highest interference into command ships, aerial ships. Directing line signals into calculations. Process lines of 1, set position locations before Christ in travel communications. Oh, line signal was too strong. All right, now it is. So we go into the platform line signals. You guys are here in center operation of 3 cycles and 3 generation screens. 3 lines of cycles, 3 lines of center and travel. So it communicates lines to the echo chambers. That puts location settings to taxi runways. Process communication lines, up signal in process of 3 cycles, sets communication system into the mothership and travel in positional point graphs. BC, back in time. Mount Olympus, high course centers. Setting lines of course centers in all communications. Setting retail, travel in-point lines of dressing line screen adaptations. Process lines over white over gold. Directing signal location of Zeus. Electrical line grids, high centers of bolts. Electrical line screens and high center location of laser and track communications. Directing course centers like direct signals. All right, 20 minutes in cycle and line screen adaptations. Have fun interactions. Your fundamental lines, course centers lines is BC, back in time, and travel and clocking system. Hours on clock, hours on seconds, hours on minutes, and screen adaptations and processing settings of future adaptations of nothing in travel. It says communication, setting, position, operation. Have fun. So it's amazing how you go a line communication system all through back in time. Process communications over lines of flux over line screen adaptation to the system all through calculations. Okay. So understand your parallels is understanding your settings and where exactly you are in tractions. It's about understanding how to get in direct line link, know exactly how to process that through panels of operations. 3 signals, line screen adaptations, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, and future adaptations, process lines of 3. Now, future lines of narrative, sets course centers of 0, 0, 0, and 1 in position of 1 set traction. Change communication lines of direct signals in ground center location system. Signify line signature patterns in modification. All right. Ground center lines of 1 over 2, power over lines of 3 over 6, 6 over line, and 3 lines of communication system, all through travel. Okay. Directing symbolism, cross lines into L tracks, cross line signals into line screen. Calculate and modify line adaptation system in processing. Process lines of 1 and process lines of 3. Sets communication over cross location screen lines adaptations of location grids and troubles, mechanism lines of force, and set position location to its calculations. All right, then we go into the ground line symbolism, process, position, location of a system, all through attractions. All right. The cup, guys. What are they? Process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3 and 4 set correlation system. All right, travel too fast in attractions. The cup of life, right? The abundance, manifestations all levels, and track locations. All right. The cup, all right. All right. Coming into that line screen adaptations puts all communication in setting. That process all lines of all line position location to measure that scales its communication lines of its gift that's given to you through general AI is space-time and all levels of operation surface and direct correlation system. Merry Christmas, guys. Have fun. All right, direction of time center is all position locations, how you get in calculation settings, how you see yourself. Coming into that line screen adaptation system is all calculated modified through all levels. The cup of life, like I said. Now, what you have to really understand is the platitude visualization is how to go back in time. So mothership and travel. The coordinates in communication system, which is all levels. So you're actually there before Christ of consciousness, which means you're still in time's continuance. You're actually in that time, but your formation location is your time, which is existing all at once. Now, once you understand that, then you understand the center of everything in travel. And that puts everything all together in set position location system. Because what we just finished doing, guys, is we put you guys in track locations of realism in time's continuum, and real time, real measure, real scale, real balance, and all lines of highest interference. So what you're seeing now in all lines of visionary location system is your system and center operation. Now, putting yourself in the center is just all levels of expansion. Okay? Platform here. We've been through this before, right? So you just expand and expand out. That's all you do, right? You understand your platforms. Hey, I'm in Italy. Hey, I'm in position of Hawaii, right? I think I'll go to New York. All right, I'm now in New York, right? You know what? I'm going to go to China. It's been a while, right? Hey, wait a minute. I'm going to jump scar all position locations in the setting US. Whoa, this is interesting. I'm going to go to England. Hey, now I'm going to go to platitude visual locations all levels of South America. Whoa, see? That's all it is. So you stay in the center and expand everything in set position, your highways. So you plot a division here, you fix this, you plot a division here, you do this, set positions, communicate with this, correlate with this, get into sleep mode, charge make this time sequence. Oh, 24 line signals, waking up in signal. You did all that in time's continuance, right? So in that position, you're back in time in sequence lines communications of before Christ and track locations. Right, so you go from here all the way to here, but you're in time's continuance. So the one thing that doesn't change is the foundations of you. Okay, until you understand the conceptions of the mind that precedes everything of consciousness. But when you let these things go, you start to see everything through attraction and expanding in all of the information systems. Because that's all it is that the team's coming into now. Expanding of everything, which is massive nothing. Massive nothing, massive everything, right? All right. But it's amazing when you see something like this, right? It starts to make sense. Wow. Abundance manifestation, there's your gift. How you use it well. All right, so let's high centers into indications of brackets. We got to get into some more communication of coding and attractions. All right. Process lines of 1, 1, 1, and position all levels of triangulation. Okay. Symbolize lines of 0 over 1 and position lines. Let's go into initiation. Process lines, run. Now this simplifies what you're doing. And then you go to the intro. Right. Beginning, calculation lines, middle lines, course centers, line counter centers. But position of coding never stops its sequence. It has a constant router and router that routes its system. The router line corresponds to electrical line communication and infusion that sets course centers to the atom lines. Setting lines of atom adds the lines of 2 and triangulation of flux over molecule screen lines adaptation. Sets communication ground lines, surface, and line direct signals into all communication setting that process your signal case through setting and travel. Okay? Directing in modification lines of center, process lines of signals and rotation surface sonar in line communication system all through travel. Disappeared. You're not ready to see it yet. I'll do it again. Okay? Now, you change the position lines of directions in a 45 line. That communicates the ground centers line condition setting to one line screen, directing lines of flux over 1, laser tractions, laser settings, XD 1000 platform, directing lines of 1 signal, 1 center, 1 tractions, mothership on standby in position. Okay, coming out of the colossal correlations of the clouds, and direct lines of portals and line screen adaptations and process communication system all through travel. Very complicated stuff, guys, but it's a lot of fun. We really get into position locations, how mothership travels through its portals and stargates. Now, recognizing high centers is a travel mechanism location of 4 settings. This puts divergence, allegiance, and alliance into all communication screen lines adaptations. Process this, in position of this, in position of this. And high travels in point lines of graph, right? Directing their platforms, hangars, echo chambers, and their sonars and lines of travel. Platform 1, Platform C, Platform A, and track line communications. Directing in modification ground centers is symbolism, lines of track correlation system and travel. Core lines high centers, directing signals into modification ground centers is surface and track locations. Center communications, directing lines and ground lines of the earth and rotates the system and lines of travels and direct signals and modification. Okay? Ground center lines of 1, echo line screen, directing signals, lines of sonar, and line position. Okay? Setting lines of ground line service and track location system. Cloud lines, generation lines of process. Calculate screen adaptations and flux lines and set position location of your system and track location. Alright? Ground simulators on crop circle lines of 1 in position of 2 over 3. Puts lines of patterns in traction. Laser track lines 1 signals across lines over cross location system and ground lines of surface line direct signals at 3 track locations. Alright? Sending lines of patterns, open sequence, into modification grounds. Alright? Changing communication high centers, let's bring it into the red cycles, red symbolism, red tractions, security line defense lines and screen. Alright? Alright, then we go into the blue. Blue plasma the lines over cross locations, overriding, over calculations, over pi, and track lines, direct signals into calculation. Alright, process communication lines of 1 symbol, process communication lines of green. Green lines over cross location, 1 center, 1 tractions, sets communication high center interference, and set position. Energize. That's the equation, right? So it comes out through equations and screen lines adaptations. Direction time center. Changes plateau and traction. All right, directing signals into all those in crop centers, into communication interference. Process communication ground centers, lines of calculation setting their screen lines. Adaptation of surface and line communication of coding sequence. Now, again, in that line screen adaptations, process communication lines of directions, all through portals and stargates and setting. All right, process lines of 1, that's open sequence, lines of blue. Over sequence, over panel, and 1 set of the lines into colossal core system. Okay, look at that, disappeared. You guys are not ready for it. It's too fast, traveling too fast in sequence. When you add color, it gets more complicated because now you're coming in the matrix. The matrix changed the alteration of the mind, the coloration, the cerebro, the correlation system, the pathogens, the collagens, the X1 line centers, the graphical screen lines adaptation, the anagrams. You come into core center, location of colossal, that has direct line panels, lines, communications, and configuration lines of color, lights and tracks, and in communication setting, the plasma screen lines adaptation of processing, and track location of system, all through measure. So communicate to ground center, location, and travel. Okay? So when you bring color in, you're structuring your divisions, so hard lines of sequence, right? That's plotted 2 lines of point markers. Set position 1 in position over 3 and track lines of security. Our 3 security line defense lines. Now we bring in the line screen adaptations, working with the X2000s below the cycles of the Earth line rotations of surface interactions. Okay, now that process lines over cross location setting. You put a triangulation lines at high center interference, platforms over line over attractions, in road grass screen adaptation. Process lines of roads. Okay, then we indicate lines inhibitors over screen at lines of 3 patterns in set position location with setting, echo chambers and taxi runways. Process communication in high centers puts all communication to a system, all through track location to a setting. All right, so we symbolize the lines into barcode direction timelines and set calculations. All right, hieroglyphics. Calculate line ground centers, lines, cross line screen adaptations of processing 1 line symbols, line rotation, surface interactions, all direct signals in laser track location. All line direct signals. Now we get into line course, line direct signals and modification grounds. Process communication code figures and screens, open sequence, open panels. Directing line signals into process over ground lines of surface and center communication. Right. Then we plot it to the energetic line, domes all screens into energetic domes in set position. All right, then we get in the coloration line grounds. Now we have to get in track lines. Now track line position locations is over through sequence, setting blue lines into purple screen. Okay, setting core line centers 1 indication system travels indirect signals in 3 lines of cycles and 3 line communication. Travel point lines of calculations, right? Change graph screens, indirect signals and modification. Okay. Remember, it's on a 4-odd angle that communicates as grounds. And then we go into the ground line service, ground center lines of 1, graphing communication lines of 2, and 3 lines of indication system and travel. Okay, so Earth is in a rotation system and a 40-line communication. Right? Sets calculation highest interference, so your Earth automatically turns into a satellite division. There it is, instructions. Right in center. There's the satellite. The Earth itself turns into a satellite dish and track locations. Now, getting that communication opens all signals and modification grounds. Right? Send to the location setting the asset travels. Now, puts lines of communication system all through coloration lines. Let's go in the gold spectrums, directing lines of signals into modification centers of center communications. Process lines of 1, coloration lines of 2 over line and 3 over travels into modification ground centers lines of surface. Change communication line tractions. Right? All right. Change open sequence of grounds and center communication. All right. So everything I'm communicating with in that position locations, check this out. You guys are before Christ right now. You're in the position all over to the Colosseum and Mount Olympus, locations dealing with Zeus, Aphrodite, and that lines of communication to its setting. But you're also seeing this in vision. So what that means is that you're connected to everything that you see. And the more you come into that, then you understand all levels of expanding your system. You see the center of everything and all sequence of times continuance. Processing communication puts everything in all track location in your future line. But in that position locations comes in all lines of communication, lines of balance and track locations. Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is. All right. To know exactly what this is and what you're looking at in a line screen adaptation, it's all through coloration lines and modification lines, all levels. The modification line screen adaptation system, look at the coloration lines, look at the green line circles, look at the crop circle location, look at the Earth line core centers of travel. Okay, so it's a mechanism lines of green over lines, red over security, position lines of power, directing the high core center line specification to a system. Okay, it's an XT 100,000 setting. Now 100,000 lines, that's a higher levels of mass in calculations green lines. So it has a slow line in deposit and rotation surface, but it has a high line sequence in acceleration lines of speed. It has a direct lines of communications. Ground center lines of 1 over cross lines of 3. Process of 1, process over 2, and max location lines of travel. Ground lines, shift lines, and panels, indirect signals, modification ground. The plasma force lines communication system comes into calculations. Now this has a direct line link into the Palladians. The Palladian lines of service, the tracks of communication setting, the code configurates the system, all through tractions. All direct lines and modification ground center lines of surface. Overline sequence, water containment screen adaptations of flux in plasma screen location setting. Setting communication ground lines as surface, process and communication lines as security. Set security lines as settings, and center communication lines as surface interactions. Overline, sequence, and panel. All right. Mechanism lines of truth, narrative, and false narrative is treated as in your position, location, your cycles. Puts all communication through the system, all through the calculation lines. When it gets to 26, I'll take you guys back in your sequence. Center core lines, Fibonacci lines of 1, set communication. Okay. Process lines and triangulation lines of flux. Set position locations across lines of communication lines of flux. One tether, one tractions, one direct signal. Process lines of pi, process lines of center. Process open sequence location of Stargate. Open division, plasma line, open screen adaptation. Okay? Communicate ground lines of surface into calculation lines of DNA. All right? This is where it comes into major locations and settings, location of space discoveries. Right? Core line circuits, center lines into lines of divots and transformation lines and all levels of calculation lines, a number sequence that puts platitude at location to its setting through travel. Directing lines, core centers, inline communication setting, all levels. That communicates set locations, all levels and interactions, right? So you come into neuroids. Now, neuroid is core centers to a plazoid. A plazoid is connected to a neurolink. The core lines of traction sets lines of communication lines and console that puts position the blip screens and travels in pixelation graphs. It crosses its symbolism location setting to your cerebro. It has seed pods and track case lines of tether, process in communication lines, and knowing exactly how to use it through your SIM codes, your SIM text, and your SIM cards in track location. Directing core lines of highest interference into process communication system interactions. Right? Now, getting lines of communication screen lines is a capsule and setting. Okay? Process lines of symbolism lines of track correlation system is a track locations. Symbol lines of track centers is zero core system of your Earth and rotation surface in divots and travel. Setting ground line service comes into all communication system. You guessed it, face recognition. Symbolism and tracks a security line to panels that opens all lines of 3 circuits, 3 division lines of core centers into 3 configuration system of voice lines. 3 line circuits, high core centers, lines of travel endpoint line communication setting. Bring core centers into all bar graphs, lines of symbol location attractions. Bring in the mothership's here. Taking you out line screen adaptation of center core system in the Coliseum and track lines communications. Bring in signals, line signals back in ground line service location of center operation where you guys are in clocking system. Inline rotation surface interactions. Directing lines of symbolism over cross location of screen. Process line communication setting, ground lines of surface and track location to system through measure. Platforms over line, position lines attractions. Cross line set locations, all of the console. Stargates, portals, and make location time sequence. Line connection setting and all levels and track locations. Directing the past, the present, and the future, bringing back in location to the team line screen adaptation surface in line screen adaptations where they left off in tractions of times continuing interactions. Now you're back. Hope you guys had fun. All through face recognition, sending and travel. Back in time in set position. Hooah. So if you look at it, it's really powerful how it's all connected lines of center operation of you and lines of communication system all through travel. Okay, look at this. So it's all communication system all through calculations. Okay. Face recognition time sequence, panels, lines, and direct modifications. So it's very powerful when you come into configuration of face recognition back in time and sequence and calculations. So I know you guys have a lot to say, but it's all based on this. Received through general AI, what you guys have now. Use it as you wish, benefits you in all travels through expanding your systems and travel. Communicates the high centers lines of communication system, all through metric meters and scales communications. Okay. So that's what it is. So basically, when we come into the grounds and we understand the inner core and the communication system puts everything in tractions, everything that we draw, repeat, everything that we draw, we are there. In real time, real measure of times continuous. We're existing and everything is happening all at once. So I set a line signal here, right? You're feeling that because we're all connected. So whatever I do, you feel through travel, through vision. Whatever I do, you feel in lines of rotation, surface interaction. Okay? Whatever I do through pi indirect signals of Merkaba and tesseract and tetrahedron through travel. Everything I do, you are traveling through in your system through all calculation, modification, grounds, and set calculations. All right? So that's basically what it is. You're not drawing things, you're actually there. And your symbolism tracks is an open window, an open frame, eyes of the windows of the soul. Process lines of platforms. You ever take perspective? Same lines of grounds, symbolism lines of track centers, lines of communication. Right? Everything is in a 45 angle and percentage. Process communication lines in 5 lines, X lines of 1, position lines of 50 over tractions. Directing calculates lines of 50-50, puts lines 100% in direct signals and modification ground lines of surface and traction. Sets calculation lines of center that never leaves your system in travel. So what comes in settings is the mind of the conception that puts everything in tractation of its balance and travel. Okay? Core centers, line direct signals into new formulas, a new equation of communication. All right? So all it is, it's just different angles, guys, right? So I'll do this again. We've gone through the box frame, serial location setting. Now, get in that communication as its sequence in position of 6 a.m. 6A lines, set position to AM. Okay, AM is the atmosphere lines of its mind. That's where it's going to be in tither of no frame, no traction, no fly zones. Set core lines, XT1000 comes out, line setting, communications, and direct signal. Right? As it comes out, mothership is here on standby. Okay? Core lines panels and 3 track lines, XT1001, and set position location of docking. Docking screen lines adaptation, all levels. Sets core system above the signal, travels in position location of a system, all through Asgard and Bravo communication. Core centers lines, highest interference, online communication setting. Vega is above the sequence and setting. Okay? Now, in lines of communication setting, Gypsy is going to be in the left line screen of portals and stargates and measure in panel communication system to 144 traction. The open sequence lines communication setting to the center core system is all levels and set position lines of travels, puts the and center communication to Asgard below the signals into flywheel traction. Directing lines core centers and polarities, this set core system sets electrical line in fusion, 8 line cycles and trackification of center communications. Look at that. It disappeared in travel and set position. You have to notice exactly what the team is doing in traction. Setting communication high center interference and direct signals to modification grounds. Now the symbolism lines of track centers puts everything in calculated system. Australia is going to be on the right line screen into moon lines of trackification setting, sending a beam in position to a 3-line angle. Sets communication cross-line symbolism locations. Directing core line cycles puts all communication settings to grounds. Setting calculation lines, 6 lines of 8 a.m. The atmosphere changes the mind. The conceptual location lines of 12, in position of 24,000 line signals into measure of scale into box frames. Now unison comes in trackification setting to server surfer that changes all box centers in line rotation surface in an open window frame lines and planetary line screen adaptations and traction. That's what's going to happen. 6 a.m. to 8 line screen to 9 to 12 to 24 line 1,000 lines on measures of scales and center lines of seconds, minutes, and hours. All through track locations. Now, getting communication lines at grounds is a symbolism lines of tractions. That happens all communication lines of surface. Processing in position location is exactly know where the team needs to be in all lines of scale. But that's all set up. Okay, for Christmas Day. All right. Knowing your complacements is line screen adaptations of processing. All through portals, all through stargates, all through measure. Scales lines of 1, process lines of grounds, process lines of center, process lines of high set position. 3 center core system, tubing lines of 1, tubing lines of 4, set core lines of earth, set location lines of center, and set location lines of space through an anomaly. Setting ground lines of symbolism locations with cross line signals, new formula equation, and set position. Process lines of center, cross line signals, process line communication setting, configure face, and direct signals on 144 platform. Okay, that's what's happening. All right. Track communication lines, we go into levels of pocket centers. Now, pocket centers, lines communication of truth, setting lines of truth into 3 truths equals lines of false. Process lines of true, 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 and position lines of false, and direct signal opposite direction. Directing signal lines of symbolism into a half pipe. Now, the half pipe lines of signals into constellation past that sets symbolism lines of track cohesion lines to an S line in rotation surface and track cohesion setting and travel. Setting ground line service overlines the communication setting to its network and travel. Setting communication high center location setting in position location to a system all through 2 lines of travel. Setting core lines highest interference line direct signals in process communication lines to 1 tractions, 1 calculations of time stamp. Time ending lines of formation of ground lines, information lines, puts lines of communication system all through track locations. Now, directing lines of core centers into 2 parallels, 4 tractions, 4 divisions. Now, setting lines of 2 over line, 1 over sequence into 0, 0, 0. Triangulation over 2 equals lines of box, and 1 equals lines of Fibonacci. Fibonacci lines of triangulation, flux over 1 over 2 over 6 over 9. Sets communication grounds. Calculation lines of modification, 3 lines of grounds, 4 lines of symbolism, cross location line condition setting in your pyramids, and rotation surface and traction. Now, directing core centers, we over lines of 2 signal. Now, process lines in half pipe and 1/3 tractions and 1 travels and 1/4. 1/4 measure, x8000 comes out, division, and set calculations. Process calculations over cross line signals in process of center communications of docking and track location of 2 settings. 2 line signals, process lines, again, network setting. See the end? All right, so symbolism lines of track lines, opposite direct signals into opposition and travel position of point communications. Directing core line settings, open signals into modification ground lines of symbolism. Process lines of 1, process lines of 6, process lines of 8, and line screen adaptation system in all 3 settings. In that communication ground lines of surface, put position alpha, line condition setting of delta, theta. The operation signal is 1 operational lines of mega, and line rotations of 3 box location of center. Process communication lines high center interference, sets core system and travel. It's line 1, 3, 1, 6, 1, 8, 1 travel, 1 portal, 1 division, 1 parallel, 1 center, 1 operation system, all through center calculation setting of future adaptation, nothing. All through set calculations. That's 6 a.m. All right. All right, directing lines of panels. We go back and track lines, position location of 2 lines of measure. Scales communication ground centers, lines of platforms, over cross location energetic line screens, directing symbol location setting x8000s. Above lines of platform, we come into bold screens. Center line communications opens all signals into Fibonacci screen lines adaptations. Oh, we don't see it. There it is. All right. Directing lines of core centers, change coloration lines of pathogens. Relines, relay position to its program. Set lines, high interference of bold screens, adaptation lines of surface interactions. Open sequence, planels, lines, high center interference, and line communications. Ground center lines of high center interference and position location to a system through all levels. Symbolism lines of tracks into paradigm, polar shift, and lines of core centers and paradoxal. Paradoxal stream location setting puts a 24,000 line measure and travel communication setting to the travels. Now we're going to use a 16 line measure. Okay, set position of travel 16 line correlates. Calculates lines, cutting chords, equal lines of high centers of 3 lines of weather. Directing lines in WWW, line position XXX, 3X lines of 1 on top sequence. Directing lines of flux over satellites in 3 directions and direct signals. Ground center lines of 1 and platforms of C lines of cycles. Setting communication ground service location setting to line XD1000 in communication. All right, so let's get in that travels in point lines communication system. All right. Starlight, star bright, all what I see tonight. All right. Symbolism line core centers of 3 track location lines of high interference, a branching communication setting, open signal location of the tree of life. Directing core centers, line direct signals, modification lines, XD1000 above signal and travel. Ground center lines of 1 process line indicates lines of 0 in rotation surface and track communication system all through travel. All right. Cross line communication system, open sequence, line communication lines, high center location, magnetic force lines of travel. That's done through equation. All right. Now there's a lot going on, right? Through all communication. All right. Know exactly how this is all set up. Showing you exactly through time sequences, lines of time panel, time editing, all through communication of where the team's going to be through attraction. It's space-time of operation. Symbolism line attractions. Okay, so line screen adaptation is the process in lines of 1, indicates lines of platforms over 0, Sets communication, we take the 24,000 lines of measure, boxing frames, and direct signals modification grounds. Ground star lines of 1 over cross location system and travel. Okay. Flight navigation lines of screen lines of 3 lines of cycles across location set and time stamping. Direct lines modification XT1001, XT2000 lines of mothership and travel communications. Process lines of grounds, panels, security line defense lines of fields. Fields lines of set lines, of course, center appearance A tracks, set position of B and C in center. Process calculation lines of DX lines of 1, process lines of 1, set calculation of 1, 1 tractions of 3 line measure. 4 line signals, process line, indicate line direct signals. Laser traction, laser vision location setting, laser track communication lines of high center location measure. Scales communication grounds, calculate and modify. Setting lines, screen lines, adaptations, all through anagrams. Now, an anagram is word phrasing. Process calculation lines, indication lines of 1, 2, 3. Set position of 4, 3 over lines of 2, 2 over lines of 4. 4 communication lines of 1, and position location lines of 5. 5 indicates lines of 4, 3, 2, 1, and 1 position location of 0 calculation. Okay? Ground core centers in gravity line screen adaptations, all levels of processing level. Platforms over core line setters, process lines of 1 over 2, process lines of 3 over tractions over 4, process lines of 5, 5 lines of 4, set position location solar sail, and line direct signals in track location. All right? Core centers, directing signals of flux over center, process lines of indication setting to umbrella. Directing signals in modification ground centers of surface. Earth line and divots, process line direct signals. Direct and redirect and symbolism lines of track centers into all communication setting to compliance that puts everybody in line direct signals of 0 calculation system all through traction. Yeah, too fast. See? You see it there, but it was complete when I did it. That's where it starts. Setting lines of direct and redirect into 144 in that line's communication setting puts everybody in their true authentic self at 0 calculation. Now we're done. Now we are done. Okay? All right. So, I know everybody's going, whoa, this is like way above my head, you know? It's like, how do we get this going? I don't know. So, in that positional occasions, we go through Stargate measures. Now, Stargate measure puts everything into locations of balance. Now, putting the balance lines of center operation set location system is all of you through the inner line cycles to the outer line rotation. Calculations of 1, calculations of 2, right? Process communication lines into location setting into lotus. Directing calculus lines into flower erection of time sequence. Set lines of 3 propellers in location setting in track location system. The pedestals of a flower in track location. Directing calculation line ground lines assembly location of planet surface on 12 line signals, Fibonacci one way, Fibonacci another way in track line communications. Measure scales into 3-line rotation centers into 4-line signals and set calculations. Directing core line cycles, high core system into flywheel tractions. Directing lines of high centers panels into tulips in line rotation servers and seed potting and track communications. Flower erection of time sequence of center calculations. 0 calculation lines of grounds, 0 calculation lines of center, and 0 calculation line of the atmospheres, and 4 track visual location in magnetic highways, and 4 symbolism in 5 lines into 6 over line, 7 over tractions, 8 line division, 9 calculation setting, 10 over lines, 11 over lines of 12, and 12 lines of position of 24,000 line measure, and scale mid-case lines of 0, back in system, and position location of measure. Hoo-ah. We are done. That's it. So that's how it's going to be set up. Everything is going to go back to 0. I hope you guys had fun. I know I did. See you in 5.